for being here. It's now 2:45 in the afternoon on Tuesday, August 23rd. We're going to resume with our work session items and go to memos of interest. And the first item, John, if you would like to introduce it.
Yeah, we have the airport semi-annual update, and we have Jim here ready to speak to that and answer questions.
Okay. Thank you, Jim, for being here again.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
And we've all looked through this very thorough memo, but the viewing audience hasn't. And so I'd love you to highlight various areas as an introduction as you go through, and then we'll turn to board member questions about the report.
You bet. Thank you very much, Rachel. Jim Elwood, I'm the airport director. The memo of interest in front of you covers quite a large section of activity at the airport over the last number of months. Probably one of the more significant items besides the runway extension was a flood that we had here on July 18th, and the quantity of water that came on board in the terminal building was really quite exceptional. It's not unusual for that building to flood, but to this extent it was quite unusual. And you know, I think it's important to kind of pause and say thank you, because there was a number of airport staff that worked throughout the night to make sure we were ready for customers the next morning. And what probably made it kind of, I think it describes the character of our community, was a number of airline employees stuck with us through the whole night and helped get the building back in shape. And they all got personal notes and some acknowledgement from all of us. But I think it's kind of a neat statement of the camaraderie that exists at the airport, and it doesn't always have to be one group or another. It's really a team effort out there. Some of the pictures that are in the diagram show that we had several inches of water through a pretty significant portion of the building, and we had to bring in some remediation kind of folks to help us make sure there wasn't mold and some of those things. But in the end, the worst complaint I think we got was some folks, when they had to take their shoes off at security, the carpet was still damp, but that was the biggest inconvenience that took place. We had some good fortune in that the water didn't damage some of the TSA equipment and those kind of things as well. But anyway, that was a big deal for all of us. Kind of moving on, we've acquired a new piece of equipment back in May, help us with snow removal. As you know, we try to cycle that snow removal equipment out about every 5 years, and we've got a lot of challenges to make sure we get rid of the snow and keep the airport open and earn the confidence of the community that the airport's reliable and works well. Dave Elaine is here, and I'm going to let him just touch base a little bit on the runway extension. And so Dave, if you wouldn't mind coming up.
Hello, Dave Elaine, the Assistant Airport Director for Administration and the Project Manager for the Runway Extension Project. It's going extremely well. We have been blessed with very good weather, and the project is exactly on time and exactly on schedule. As Jim has spoken to you all about, we're working very closely with FAA to do everything we can to accelerate the relocation of the FAA's localizer antenna that's located on the airport that has to be moved farther to the south to accommodate the runway extension. And the work for that has been accelerated. The pad is in, and they're going to be pouring concrete on that new foundation for that antenna here probably by tomorrow. So that looks pretty like it's going pretty well. The rest of the project is going swimmingly. We're still moving dirt for the taxiway extension, which is most of what everybody sees as they drive down Highway 82. But the really fun part is going to start here on September 7th, and that's when we get into the meat of the actual extension of the runway pavement and the subbase itself. At 7 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, September 7th, we will shorten our runway temporarily to 6,500 feet to allow construction activity to actually start at the end of the runway and get in there and start tearing up some of the subbase and start putting in some of the material in preparation for paving. There will be, again, as a reminder, 2 3-day windows between September 7th and the end of the project in late October, where we will have to shorten the runway to 6,000 feet so that we can accommodate construction activities right up at the runway end. We're required by FAA to maintain 1,000 feet of safety area between aircraft operations and anything that might be at the end of the runway, and the only way to do that is to move the end of the runway to the north. Those dates are September 13th, 14th, and 15th, and again on October 4th, 5th, and 6th. And so really the airport, again, is not closed, despite some of the media coverage. To the contrary, the airport does not close, but during those 2-3 day windows, United Airlines is not able to fly 6,000 feet. It's just not enough runway length for their CRJ 700 to operate safely. So Frontier will continue to operate. General Aviation will continue to operate. Airport's not closed. Again, United has removed all of those flights from their system clear back in March, so we've really not seen a whole lot of impact for those dates. They've been planned out well in advance, and going to keep our fingers crossed for good weather and get that critical work done and stay on track to be finished with that project at the end of October.
So even though the airport will be open, during the time where the extension of the runway is the work is being done, is there any concern about incoming or outgoing flights, whether it be commercial or GA, even with just at 6,500 feet, just knowing that the runway is a little bit shorter and maybe some pilots are used to utilizing the entire runway?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that question, George, because we did have a few users come to us, and they gave us I thought it was a terrific idea. And so currently there's a flag out at the 6,500 foot mark. We've shared that with pilot groups that frequent our airport, so they can kind of get used to where that point lives on the airport as they operate today. So we tried to kind of keep that in mind. Plus we've shared that information pretty broadly in the pilot community as well in terms of the change in link. So hopefully that word got all the way around, and pilots are pretty diligent about, and the communication link to be able to share that information with pilots is pretty strong. So I think we're in pretty good shape there.
Good question. Any other questions on the runway project?
Yeah, Dave, when we went through the process of approving the runway extension, you and I talked about markings, on
Correct.
the actual pavement.
Correct.
When we adjust for the lengths, the markings will still be consistent with what is currently used?
They will. Basically, Jack, all we do is when we move the runway down to shorten it by either 6,000 or 6,500, we basically repaint the existing end of the runway 500 or 1,000 feet farther down. And then there's some different markings behind that to the south to indicate that that area is not available for takeoff. It's painted yellow rather than white. So that indicates that
And the pilots are all hip to...
Exactly. So, and then when it's all done, again, we'd reemphasize when the project is all finished, the landing point for aircraft, the very few aircraft that do land to the north from the Buttermilk side, that landing point will be exactly the same as it is today. The landing point's not any closer to Buttermilk. The extension is for takeoffs only to the north. And so that landing point, again, does not change. And again, we would reiterate, the project does not accommodate larger aircraft. The 95-foot wingspan limitation remains. Does not accommodate heavier aircraft. The 100,000-pound landing weight limit that we have remains the same.
Other questions about the extension project?
And again, I'd be happy to accommodate any of you individually or collectively on a tour once we get into the exciting part. It's really kind of cool to see the stuff that's going on that you can't really see from the highway. There's a lot of work going on, and it's very exciting. And if you want to come out and take a first-hand look, just give me a call anytime.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Jim?
Kind of continuing on down the list, as you may recall, we initiated a wildlife hazard assessment to kind of monitor birds and mammals and such that might be on the airport that could be hazards to aircraft. We've now got that draft report back in our hands, and we've submitted some of our thoughts back to the contractor, and that will be on to the FAA. One of the things that may be of interest to you is that the folks picked up on that drainage issue that we talked about earlier today relative to the grant application, that standing water was indeed something they wanted to see fixed as part of an outcome of the wildlife hazard assessment. So I wanted to kind of tie those issues back together. Last December, we have, as you may know, we also have an annual inspection. The FAA comes in and looks at the airport really from tip to tip, both paperwork, physical conditions, our training records, how we go about doing our business, and I'm extremely pleased to report we did quite well, and the inspector was very pleased with our training records. And I want to just take a moment and compliment the board. You've allowed us to maximize our training budget and put it to good use, and it really shows in those kind of moments. So I wanted to acknowledge that. The kind of a cool thing, we're testing, as you know, the airport markings, all the paint that Dave just talked about for the runway, taxiway, across the apron, all of those paint markings are subject to wear and tear, just like we see on the streets when cars go over them, and plows and those kind of things. And one of the outcomes of that FAA inspection was that we're going to have to go to painting the airport twice a year. And that's a substantial expense. It's about $80,000 per paint application. So that line item is going to have to grow for future years. Well, in that process, we decided to do some testing, and one of the things that a number of airports across the country are now looking at is using an extremely high-quality thermoplastic marking. And we've probably seen those at crosswalks in various places on the public side, in your travels. But this is specifically designed for airfield use. And so we put down our first test strip for that this summer. And we're anxious to see how it wears through one of our more harsh winters and a lot of ultraviolet sunlight that we all enjoy here. So we'll keep you posted on how those test results come back. It has the potential, while a higher front-end cost, to actually lower our cost of painting and give a higher quality product in the end for pilots to see. So we're kind of excited to see where that takes us.
Well, I was glad to see from the report that it was the lower bid price on the painting that allowed you a little money to experiment. And I think that's a wise way to stage this, so that we're starting with the test area and see how it holds up here rather than going whole hog into it. And the only thing I would like you to kind of follow up on further, and I'm familiar with the ones that are sidewalk in the city and knowing that they're different, but after they put them in, they seem to really last quite a while, but they would, rip or deteriorate in small areas, and then the city would just do the regular painting to finish filling those in. And so that would be something to see if that's clear with the FAA, is that once you're all the way in that system, or you're all the way in that system, or can you just refresh those as needed with paint over top of them? So again, something to investigate later, but as we look to the long-term cost, we're going to have to see, would you have to redo them when 5% of it has eroded, or is it 25% has eroded, and how frequently that would be. And so we really want to get the baseline and the options for if we move fully into that program.
Yeah, I think all those points are good ones, Rachel. This product is a different one than you've probably seen on the pedestrian crossings. The color, and there's actually glass beads that we're required to apply to increase reflectivity. The material used on airports, that glass bead and color go all the way through. And so while we could see, some deterioration on corners or, pieces delaminating or whatever, which is part of the point of the test, it's a little different product. And so we probably wouldn't be painting over the top. It's actually a removal process. Once they get to kind of a certain point, you pull the entire strip up and put down fresh.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
We had a visit from United Airlines a couple of weeks ago, and the person who's in charge of all of the United Express operations throughout the United system, her name's Alicia Gabriel. She came to town, spent the better part of a week, so she really had a good chance to get the flavor of the community. And she told us while she was here that United wants to rebrand all of the signage and clean up a lot of the things that have been around that airport that United owns for a long time, and ticket counters and how the customer experience and interface takes place. So we're excited to see what that looks like. We have not seen the drawings yet, but that new merged Continental United branding, they want to bring it to a community near and dear to all of us. So that's in process. The next component is the snow season recap from last year and what it takes to keep our airport open through the winter season. And the bottom line there is that it cost in the 2010-11 snow season just a little short of $500,000 to keep the snow off the runways and the airport safe and open for operation. In your chart, you can see that we now track a number of moving parts there in terms of how many inches of snow and how it came about to us, and equipment hours and labor hours and those kind of things. Now, it's important to remember that those costs are all put back into the rate base that we charge the airlines and general aviation each year. And here in a few months, you'll get the resolution that calls for airport rates and charges. These kind of numbers and this kind of detail gets folded into those calculations to make sure that the airfield pays its own way.
Any comments or questions on that portion? I would just like to offer compliments, really. In reviewing this, it shows the increasing professionalism of the airport. Things like the glycol recovery system, maintenance and tracking. So we have an expense broken out for that now, whereas, in some of the earlier years, we might be trying to do comparison to the 07-08 year when there was a comparable snow amount. We didn't have that sort of breakout of numbers, and that sort of environmental system to recover those de-icer materials, I think, is huge. And really compliment you on contained cost within that section. I think that is just really huge. And, so may see a little lower use, it seemed, on the chemical de-icer than in some previous years. Either that or we're getting better prices. But the 08-09 year, 171 inches, $310 in de-icer, and this year with 207 inches of snow, $170,000 in de-icer. And so that is related to more labor but less de-icer. Then I can understand that cost shift, and I appreciate that balance.
Well, we appreciate acknowledging those details because we review these constantly and look for efficiencies. You brought up one line item, and I'll share with you. You may recall that there was a strike a couple years ago, and it drove those costs up significantly.
Oh, right, for the de-icers.
And the combined reduction is a result of a somewhat step back in pricing. But we've also gotten better about how we do applications. And some of the equipment that we've brought on board helps us with that. You may recall a couple years ago we got a grant from the FAA to help us with in-pavement monitors that will even tell us when it's time to do an application or that it's still good, and it tracks the temperature shifts. And so those kind of technology enhancements have helped us a bunch as well.
Yeah. So and just kind of a closeout comment on that, because earlier in the report you talked a little bit about some new equipment that you've obtained, competitive bid and prices and things like that. And it doesn't show up in here per se, but I want to compliment you on the safety. Heavy equipment like that is nothing to mess around with, and that is forefront in all of our minds. And please continue that. Our employees' safety and the guests and the airlines' safety are just paramount. But when you're out there with that big equipment every day, you can kind of get a little familiar with it and casual. And so that safety record and the safety of our employees using that is just really paramount, and we continue to emphasize that.
Well, we thank you for those comments. We invite anybody to come out and wants to get up early and come ride with us sometime. It is pretty early in the morning when we do that. One of the keys that you kind of brought up about snow removal is that equipment is very large, has a lot of momentum, and works very well for what it's designed to do. However, the visibility sometimes in those machines, because it's usually snowing while we're plowing snow, and then we're kicking snow up either off of the snow blowers or the blades or the brooms and some of those things. So the talent of the folks driving that is really highly valued at our airport, and we appreciate their efforts.
Yeah, did I see your hand up for a comment on this?
Yeah, on the de-icing, Jim, you had indicated in the past that the CRJ requires, and this is my terminology, a lot more care as far as surface for the runway.
Yes.
Now, is American coming into the same CRJ?
Yes. They're operating the same exact airplane that we've seen from SkyWest and United
So we'll
these
be
past years.
familiar with their needs, et cetera.
Yes, and I'll be down visiting with American next week, and we'll find out if they have any special needs that we need to accommodate. But we don't really expect too much of that because the airplane has got its own characteristics. You know, I'd like to kind of shift gears and talk about our automatic external defibs and really compliment the Aspen Ambulance District, and they did kind of across the community effort, and we participated at the airport, and we now have some very cool talent on site for not only electrical but carpenter. And so what you see in one of these pictures is a very professional looking installation of an automatic external defib machine, and it was installed and put together by our staff and made to look just fantastic. So the skill sets that we've been accumulating in certain areas is really showing at this point. And those AEDs are now in place, and we're working on making sure everybody's trained up, as well as county staff, as well as the airlines and rental cars and others that might see a need and be able to respond to it. So we're excited about where that's going. And I guess I'll close by saying I think it's been a good year for the airport, and there's been a lot of accomplishments, and the last piece talks about some of our employees and their efforts in upgrading their skill sets and talent that they bring to work each day. So I'm very proud of all of them, and they do a great job.
Shared by this board, and appreciate your leadership on that and their individual efforts going forward. Other board questions or comments on the report? Okay, that looks good. And then the next MOI is also from you.
Well, we thought we'd make good use of the time.
Yeah, I can appreciate that.
The next item deals with the affordable housing units that are located at the airport. And back when the Airport Operations Center was built, there were 3 affordable housing units built into that facility. That happened with the FAA's knowledge, approval, and acknowledgement. Well, recently the FAA has changed their viewpoint on in this case, affordable housing on airports. And there's an attached letter from the FAA in here that talks about how that needs to work. What the essence of it is that in the past we had folks in that space. There was a lottery drawn from the entire spectrum of airport employees, not just county, but they could be rental cars or airlines or any of the organizations with staff at the airport. And the direction that the FAA is giving us is that they want that to be somebody who is required to be on the airport for some emergency response or quick need to support the airport's operation directly. And so that's a shift, and it does focus us down to really county airport staff. And the reason behind their logic is that they're concerned about the safety of the proximity of that housing to the airport operation. So here in this memo, we kind of outlined where we've been and the thought that we need to go to airport staff, and we appreciate the fact that it's not exactly the limits that we desired when we set it up.
And this is somewhat informational for us because the current tenants do comply with what the FAA is expecting of us with their clarification letter.
That's correct. The challenge has been, we kept hearing that the FAA was reviewing this process and kind of preparing for some kind of change. And so over the past 18 months or so, Steve Schultz is here, who's kind of been managing those 3 housing units on the airport's behalf. As people left, we just held them open until we got this determination from the FAA. So there's not going to be an impact to current tenants, but it is a different way forward.
George, and then
So, Jim, was the employee housing, was that funded at all through the FAA?
The building was funded through the FAA in total, and we had to do a calculation with the FAA and broke out the affordable housing component because the FAA would not pay for those improvements. But obviously, they help pay for the infrastructure, sanitary sewer, all those things that make it possible. So we did a formula with them back in '06 or before '06 when the building was constructed. So they feel like they're vested, but they didn't build that square footage.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that, given the limited number of staff that you actually have that could actually utilize these units, that we may run into a situation where they may just remain vacant for a period of time with this new ruling.
Well, that's possible. We believe there's enough interest, at least at the time being, that will fill those positions, but I think that could be a circumstance that happens.
And then if that were to happen if they ended up being vacant for a certain period of time, do you think we have any recourse to go to the FAA and explain, here we've got some units that were built, not on your dollar, and we want to utilize the space?
Well, we could try that tactic. I think their position is pretty clear, and they really believe it's a safety issue. And so I would be pleased to go back and have that conversation with them, but given the current conditions and position in the FAA, I'd be surprised if they moved off of it.
Well, hopefully that won't happen for a while. It sounds like you've got some good tenants in there now, and employees that are happy being there, and hopefully will stay there for a while.
That's a cool little site.
What size are those? Are those one bedrooms or twos?
They're one bedrooms. They have kind of an open floor plan. They're about 825 square feet.
Jack, your hand up on it?
Yeah, on this item, Jim, you recommend that these are accessed by county employees, but my read in your memo kind of restates it on the second bullet from the bottom, page 1, says would be accessible by those who have official duties running the airport or FBO. So why is your recommendation to limit to county employees versus the little bit larger pool, as it were? Kind of per George's.
You bet. Because of the way the FAA wrote the support letter, they specifically call out running the airport or FBO, and the fact that at airports the ability to get to mechanics or fueling, those kind of things are considered core essential services to an airport facility. A rental car perhaps not as so much.
No, but that you're not answering maybe my question, or I'm not clear, because what I'm saying under page 2, questioning, staff action. Airport staff recommends BOC grants the airport approval to fill the airport ops center apartments with county airport employees. And you
Or
didn't-
FBO is what Jack is asking. Shouldn't that also say or FBO?
I do notice the discrepancy between the letter, Jack, and I think that's a good one. We'll make that amendment and include the FBO in that process.
Yeah, the FBO, and then how about the tower? They considered, now they're different employees. And I am very comfortable with if we have discretion, and really this goes to my bottom line question. Do we have discretion in saying county employees and prioritizing, and then saying, or if not filled, FBO end? And that's maybe not a question you could answer right now, but at least it addresses George's concern.
No, I appreciate that subtlety. The tower issue was not called out by just to kind of hit that point if we could, is not called out in the letter from the FAA. And while this will seem odd, perhaps, is that because airplane operators know how to land at airports without air traffic control going on, I'm not sure that it rises to the level of saying essential
Not in this environment.
I know that sounds odd, and I'm sure the audience is wondering what that all looks like, but I know Rob's a pilot in past too, and there's lots of airports without air traffic control towers, and operations come and go okay. So we'll make the modification to the FBO. We'll keep in mind George's comments about if we have difficulties with vacancies, and we'll work that subject if it comes to pass.
Well, and if it's also the board's pleasure, we just might find out if we can prioritize as opposed to open in both pools.
Yeah, if we had built them, I'm pretty sure that we can do similar to the regular lotteries, a tier system, that if there's no applicants in the first tier, then they would default to, people put their names in the hat in the second tier. And you're suggesting that the county employees be the first tier of airport personnel and critical, and that if there's a second tier, when we're not able to fill, then they could be FBO employees. So I think we...
That'd be my preference.
Yeah, I think we could do something like that. And then I was thinking a little bit along the same lines, and this is just in the odd case that we would end up with not wanting to end up with a vacant unit, but it would seem that maybe we could work with the sheriff's office to designate the idea of a sheriff officer airport liaison, and then if a unit were to become open, we could possibly get a sheriff's officer in there who would then become that airport liaison. But it would seem that the interface between our police protective services or communication services might be enough of a nexus that, again, we don't only, again, in that odd case that we're starting to end up with vacant units because no one in either of those other first two pools is available.
I appreciate those enhancements. I'm going to be with the FAA late in the week, and I'll have a chance. I'll talk out those subjects with them, but I think you've given us some good points. We appreciate it.
Yeah, just so we keep the pool big enough.
Yes.
They may or may not want to go to ambulance, but again, if there was ever an emergency out there, we know we depend on the ambulance services pretty heavily this year. Okay. Any other questions on this? This is information more than anything, but really appreciate you keeping us up to speed on it all.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the airport?
Good job as always.
Good job as always.
Keep them flying.
Yeah, here we go.
And have a lot of spare parts too.
Yeah, and well, actually, while you're here, why don't you update the public on the Happy?
Exactly in the hot seat.
Rachel, I could suggest that we do not have these updates because it seems like they're coincidental. Last time we were here.
For those of you who read the newspaper this morning, the PAPIs, the lighting system that helps guide pilots approaching the airport, is a key component to flying at night here, and those went out of service Sunday night. A couple of flights were canceled on Sunday evening by both Frontier and United. There was a very diligent effort yesterday, and the system came back up, and there were no flights affected yesterday. I'd like to point out that this is an FAA-owned and maintained piece of equipment, and so our role from an airport administration standpoint is to kind of help facilitate the outcome and remind the FAA that the customers are being impacted and such. And so the system's back in place. I was on a telecon with quite a large number of FAA employees this morning, and from that they've committed a large stockpile of spare parts. They've got an action team coming to do a thorough analysis, inspection of the existing unit and do whatever needs might be required to bring it to quality and reliable standards. There's also some discussion going on that's still being kind of refined, so it may be slightly premature to share it today, but of even putting in a redundant system. Aspen is very unique in that no other airport anyone can think of requires this piece of equipment for nighttime instrument approaches. Once again, we're kind of a unique airport in the eyes of the FAA. So this piece is far more valuable to us than it is to a lot of airports around the country. So that's a key component, and I think that issue's now been very well driven home with with the FAA. They're starting to feel a little snake bit after last October's issues with the localizer and now this PAPI issue. And surprisingly enough, this PAPI piece of equipment, guidance piece of equipment, is a relatively simple piece of equipment as things go. And so the fact it's been troublesome is uncommon. So I think they're committed to getting it up to speed and reliable for the coming winter. And there could be some exciting ideas about putting in a redundant system so that we've got a fallback position in addition to the spare parts.
Well, let us know if we can be of assistance with any letters or joining you in any meetings, because the redundancy is the best thing I've heard so far. If for some reason it only started to fail at 3:45 on a winter afternoon where it's going to be dark so soon, even with the extra parts, we might not have time to implement a repair, and a redundant system would take care of that. And so I think we've almost been fortunate to find out that it's offline earlier enough in the day to do all this scrambling for parts and repair teams. And we know the repair teams don't live right here in the valley, so if it was just closer to dark and not have, even if you had the parts and the personnel, you'd still lose a whole bunch of evening flights in the winter. So again, let us know if we can help with emphasizing that effort.
Well, we appreciate that as well. And yesterday afternoon, you and I spoke, and frustrations were especially high at that moment. But I think a lot of ground's been covered since then. And there's one thing the FAA does very well, and that is to protect safety and to be focused on it. And I think they acknowledge that they've got an issue here. And my recommendation right now is that we kind of monitor and let them do their thing and see what the results feel like. But I think the best we'd probably see in terms of redundancy is it'd probably be by next spring or construction season. But that was probably one of the cooler things I've heard in the last 24 hours as well. So we're hard after it, and the FAA's done a better job communicating than they have historically, and so we appreciate their efforts. And so folks really busted their tail to try to get it back in service last night.
Jim, was this the same piece of equipment that was hit earlier this summer by an electrical lightning strike?
Yes.
And so rather than looking at piecemealing, replacing parts, why didn't they just replace the unit itself?
Well, the coming up with a spare piece of equipment is not always that easy to do. I think the standard spare parts inventory, as I've learned across the country, is spare light bulbs, and so because it's not that critical a piece of equipment for most airports, they now kind of get that whole spare parts issue. The kind of driving to reliability, which I think maybe was the core of your question, George, if it's been damaged, then because it was the same circuit boards that got blown out as part of that lightning strike, is that this team that's coming in and going to run a full diagnostic and upgrade the piece of equipment from stem to stern, is how it was described to me.
Yeah, because they could be replacing a part, but as you said, it could be a wire that's causing that to continue to go out. And so unless they really find the real part of the problem.
I agree, and that's why I think they're going to bring that diagnostic team in. And I'll keep you posted if they find something special in that research and get back to you. But I think they are committed to improving it, and we're going to let them do their job here for a little bit.
So did that? One last question. That impacted flights coming in the evening. So did that also impact the early morning flights going out?
Well, United and SkyWest did a neat thing. They brought an airplane in first thing in the morning and got most everybody out that was that early morning departure, 7 a.m. or the subsequent flight. Frontier was not able to do that, so there were some impacted Frontier employees from Sunday night into Monday. Yesterday, we were gearing up. If the piece of equipment had not come back up, we were intending to give United a waiver so they could land at 6:30 and pull both airplanes back out. Would have been this morning. Those airplanes were 100% full. As a matter of fact, one was overbooked, and so we try very hard to limit the number of airline waivers that we offer for the curfew, but that circumstance seemed like it was not a fault of the airlines, and a lot of passengers were going to pay the price for a relatively small number of minutes to fix the problem.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Jim? Well, again, thank you very much. We really appreciate your work and everyone's work out at the airport. Okay, we will now go to future agendas.
Few items for you. On September 6th, you'll see we added an update for the Snowmass Village Town Council. We have rescheduled that meeting then for September 19th, I believe it is. Yeah, which is a Monday from 4 to 5:30.
I have a question a little earlier on in our packet. Thursday, well, maybe it's not, but it's at least printed earlier on.
Okay.
Thursday, September 15th, 4 p.m. quarterly meeting with the Healthy Rivers and Stream Board in Plaza One. Is that a different meeting than we planned before, where they were going to join us on one of our Tuesday work sessions?
I think John added that in. I have not had a chance to chat with him about that, so let me ask him if that's the same.
Yeah, because I have a CCI meeting the next day in Denver,
Right.
and so I was going to be driving down that evening, the 15th. So, I mean, it may be okay for the board to meet there without me, but I think I had to miss the last quarterly meeting with these guys as well.
I think, as you guys see, our Tuesdays have been kind of a challenge to schedule extra time.
Well, I think besides that, I think it's because most of the members on that committee are actually work or teach school,
Yeah.
that for them to come earlier would be a problem.
Yeah, well, it's not the time that bothers me, it's the day
The date, yeah.
of being Thursday instead of after one of our regular Tuesdays. Again, I just hate to lose touch with that board and hadn't heard of this date before today. So let's just double check on that and see where we can go to. Jack?
Yeah, on that item, I mean, we clearly had this at a previous date at the end of the day, so that kind of worked. It has changed, and quite frankly, I don't think I'll be here either.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I believe me, 3 can do the job. We know that. But
Okay. We'll check in with
Okay.
John Ely on
Yeah.
that and
Yep.
kind of reconfirm where we're really going to go on that. Okay.
I was going to jump ahead to September 20th.
Okay.
Just a reminder that we're doing our site visit to GSS Properties, and then we're going to remain at Woody Creek for the remainder of that meeting. We do have some board interviews, and we'll be working with those candidates on the location.
Okay.
A question on that. I thought we decided that we did not have to re-interview people who were reapplying for positions we were going to.
I think that was, in general, a rule of thumb, but when we had created the Healthy Rivers and Stream Board, since it was a new board, people had wanted to have the chance for feedback from those board members in particular.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
and Jack?
I thought that was the practice, but we waived it when we had about 16 at one time, and people that had been there, so.
There were a
might
few
just touch
boards.
base what is the policy, but that's also particular to this board, Healthy Rivers and Streams.
John?
There were a few boards where you guys wanted to see people come back in front of you, and that, those were ones that had significant fiduciary, so like
Or
Healthy
policy.
Rivers and Streams or policy. Yeah, that's how we understood the direction. So,
I think that's accurate. Okay.
okay. Then on the next page, September 26th, just a reminder, we scheduled the abatement hearings, and then the 27th, we have our joint meeting with Gunnison County.
Okay.
And that,
And just to be clear also, I will not be present on Monday, the 26th, because it's an 1177.
and we can note that on there.
Okay. Great.
Okay. And
So that, may I clarify about Gunnison? That's their meeting dates, Sean? We'll join them for part of their meeting?
correct.
Because I can see, obviously, we cleared out
Yeah.
the day.
Now, at our last meeting, we had talked about some prep time before we meet with the City of Aspen on joint budget items. And that meeting is, I've lost it. At any rate, we have been having some...
18th of October.
Thank you. I was going too far there. We've been having some difficulty again with our Tuesdays. We've got a really light agenda right now on October 12th. I just wanted to see if the board would have any objection with, as long as that stays light, taking some time more in a workshop fashion to do some budget prep prior to that meeting.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, we'll get that.
Yeah,
on
let's
there.
go ahead and pencil it in. And
John, what was that date again? I
I'm
apologize.
sorry, it's October 12th to do the prep, and then our joint meeting is on October 18th at 4 o'clock. And that will cover, the joint meeting will cover the Health and Human Service Agencies, the housing, APSHA's budget, and then the IT budget. And we wanted some time to workshop that, and right now it's looking like our regular meetings are a little bit lighter than our workshops. And that's all I had on future agendas.
Just,
Go ahead, Rob.
just a note, I will not be here on the October 20th for the BOTC meeting. That's my cousin's wedding in DC.
Yeah, this is a funny question. I'm asking for the whole board. I don't have a hard thought on it, but I noticed on the EOTC meeting that we're hosting, which essentially means we're chairing, but we're doing it over at the City Hall. And I understand they have a better meeting room than us, and when we have a meeting in Snowmass, they have a better meeting room than us. But it kind of hides the fact that we have a really lousy meeting room, and you kind of wonder, shouldn't the public and our two boards who are our partners understand where we meet for when we occasionally talk about facility needs of the county? And why don't we go ahead and have them here if we're hosting?
Well, because we couldn't fit all the boards in our meeting room with staff was really why we made that decision, Rachel. We could try and line it up.
Well, and it's just something for everyone to bear in mind, but it's kind of like masking the fact that other meetings, when there are a lot of people who need to be in the room, you know, are in a pretty inadequate facility. And
I don't disagree. We have potentially 15 board members at the EOTC along with staff, and that it was difficult, as you say, because our room is...
yeah, well, we've packed them in before, I seem to recall, years ago. But
happy to do it here if you guys
you
want
know, it's
to.
just again for everyone else's consideration of what they'd rather do in the future, or, you know, and now borrow someone else's room for when they let us. And but it does, I think, mask the sense that, you know, what it really shows to me is that Pickens County is pretty frugal, and that we have held on to and haven't looked for upgraded facilities. But any number of times, we all see the public standing outside the door, wondering why they can't get into the meeting room, and it's pretty small. Okay, I'll let that go.
Okay.
It's just, you know, unless anyone else feels strongly about that, we should, you know, just squeeze them in here no matter what, because this is where our home base is.
So you want me to go ahead and reschedule that here?
No, I mean, I agree with your point, but there's no sense make it in an uncomfortable meeting.
EOTCs are uncomfortable enough.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there. Other than we would go, any other future agenda items that people need to bring up? And at our next issuance of the future agendas, will we have integrated in all those budget schedules, budget meetings?
They're in this.
They're
They're kind of woven in.
They're woven in, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure of that, because that schedule seemed to go out through December.
It goes
and
out
now-
beyond or.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. I want to make sure I have all my dates filled in November and
Yeah,
early
so
December.
we'll be adding those as we get into that budget calendar, we'll be adding those in, and the ones that hit in the early October and such are integrated in. But
Or even just on the last page, future meeting dates, put in November, December. 'Cause I just want to make sure I'm not getting my calendar messed up.
Didn't you hand out a budget,
Yeah.
a calendar?
we did, and I think you're asking that we just maybe attach that to the back so that.
Yeah, I just want you to integrate it.
We can do that.
Okay, thank you. Now, let's see what we normally do. We go back to manager comments.
Yeah, we have open discussion.
Okay.
Have a few items. One, this probably could have been a future agenda item. The Mount Sopris Conservation District has extended an offer to introduce themselves or reintroduce themselves to the board. Apparently, we had provided funding to the Conservation District back in 2000. I think maybe what I was going to suggest, and why I didn't bring it up in future agendas, is it might be appropriate for me to meet with the Conservation District, particularly given some of the opportunities with noxious weed control and such, and maybe visit with them, as this is really potentially a budget issue and possibly a program issue. But we could extend the invite if you guys would like to bring them in to meet with you also.
My thought would be it'd be appropriate for you to meet first and to understand, their current budget, their activities, and be able to give us an assessment of that. I do think there could be some good opportunities, given that we've kind of gone to a contract basis for our weed control and don't have a specific personnel per se in charge of it, the way that Crystal Yates was. And so we'll just wait until you've had that meeting and then try to schedule something. That makes sense?
Yeah, because as I'm skimming through this letter, what I'm picking up is they're looking for money.
Exactly.
Educating us in terms of what they do as well, which is great, but the bottom line is they're looking for some support.
Well, and some of what caught my attention that actually may make some sense for us to talk to them about is their mapping capabilities and such, which is something that through the reorgs and such, we don't have that capability in-house like we used to. And so seeing what their capacity is there and if there's maybe some benefit to that kind of partnership, and I can bring that back to you guys.
Okay. Yeah, and it's been a while, but maybe you could even give us a little bit background in the future about what conservation districts were formed for and what their authorities and charges are. Jack?
Yeah, John, you just mentioned we don't have the ability in-house to do mapping. I mean, GIS?
No,
or
we have the-
specific to weeds, or?
We have the ability, yes, specific to weeds. We've got exceptional capability to do mapping through GIS. So let me just, if I wasn't clear about that, it was more on the noxious weed side that we don't have the capacity. We did after the downturn to identify and keep up-to-date maps of the noxious weeds. So
Right.
that's the issue.
I guess what I'd like to explore before we would meet is get more information, but in particular, what are they looking for about the lack of, quote-unquote, lack of financial support from Picken County? Now, if there's a cost share or something, that's one thing, but if they're looking to be on the list of, contributors or members, the question becomes different. And so we need to, this, as far as a lot of this, I'm not sure we need this, with the exception, of course, of the noxious weed piece, which we've already talked about and Rachel mentioned with the staff moving on. But I would like to see the package. That's really what I'm at.
Yeah, I think John will investigate all those things for us, including the district's boundaries, you know, and how much overlap there is with
All
Pickens
of
County.
Pickens County.
It's contiguous with our boundaries and the small parts in Garfield County, so it does encompass all of Pickens County. And
Yeah, I can see where greater involvement would be helpful. Says we always have to watch the bottom line, but as we're implementing the watershed plan and some other things like that, they seem to coincide.
And may I have one more comment?
Yeah, please.
I'm not sure if this is the conservation district, but I would like you maybe to touch base with Dale, Will, because, for example, when we collectively with Snowmass Village, and I guess Snowmass Village was the lead in the purchase of the original conservation easement on Drosty, the conservation district was looked to as the plan for managing the property. And there's some information there that you might benefit from, Dale.
okay.
I think this was it's the only conservation district I know that's
Yeah.
soil.
Okay, very good.
Okay, thanks, Chad. Next item I had, Rachel, is one that you asked that we bring up, which is the Colorado Data Sharing Network project, and it's a Colorado Water Quality
Yeah.
Monitoring Council.
Yeah, I received a request later last week about the potential of sending in a letter of support for this project to the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And so it's really just a letter request. There's no financial contribution or anything like that. It is Lynn Paget, who is a commissioner in Luray County, and this is not her project as a commissioner. It's part of what she does is her other professional obligations. But they're trying to fill in the gaps in statewide information about impaired streams and water quality, and this is kind of that full brochure. I apologize, I did not have time to get it to you guys earlier to take a look at, and my note to John and John Ely was to please, have John Ely look it over, and if he felt it would be valuable for us as well, to let us know, and we would support that letter. But it's a type of thing that can be supportive of our efforts implementing the watershed plan. I'd already tried to link Lynn with Sharon from the Conservancy, who's done so much work on the watershed plan to make sure our data was put in. But we have all this different data in different pots, basically, and one data bank doesn't talk to the next. And so it's a project that's been somewhat funded so far and continues to go to the next levels. And so I said I would bring it forward and see if you guys were supportive of us writing a letter of support to continue the project.
Did this also go to our Healthy Rivers and Stream Board, Rachel?
To write a letter. The letters are due by the end of this week.
Oh,
So that's why it was kind of all a little bit of a last-minute request. But, I think it's valuable, and again, all we're being asked for is a support letter.
And I haven't had a chance to get feedback from John yet, because I got it this morning.
For example, Rachel, would this be a benefit for a watershed plan? I mean, as, time goes on?
I believe so. And, I'll be the first to say I'm not incredibly deeply versed in this, but I know that when we were able to go to Washington, D.C. with NACO about PILT funding, Lynn, of her own time and volunteer, made the best maps that any Western state had to talk to our congressional delegation. And they took the state of Colorado and mapped out the congressional districts and then added how much PILT was paid to each county within those districts and what the population of voters were in each of those districts, of each of those congressional reps, to let them know exactly how important PILT was. And so instead of a bunch of blank numbers on a page, it really kind of brought it together in both a user-friendly and readable manner. And they're trying to do that with the water as well. Rob?
Yes, this is the letter of support that we're talking about, and where it says organization, is that Picken County. So, I mean, explain to me what the third paragraph really means, because it talks about, providing matching in-kind grants, contributing cash match for this grant. We plan to contribute cash match for this grant. I mean,
Yeah, no, I had not,
what is
I had
all of
not
this,
taken a look to the letter.
This wasn't drafted by us. This is the proposed letter of support, and so I think from the agency, and I think what they've done is they've listed all manner of support, and so if the board just wanted to throw moral support behind the issue, we would scratch.
Oh, okay. So this came from
This
their
isn't produced-
website or whatever. This was
Yeah.
produced by them.
This isn't produced by our staff,
I
so.
mean, I think having a general support letter is a great idea. It seems like they're
But you're right, Rob, we're not going to.
They're collecting some great data, but I'm not sure that this is the support letter.
I agree. This is just all the, materials we were forwarded to modify at our discretion. It may be something that in the future, our Healthy Rivers and Stream Fund wants to take advantage of. but they
To
have to-
match grant efforts together makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense, absolutely. But I think at this point, it's just a letter of support of their organization, and, saying that their data helps support water quality issues.
So, Jack? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I guess, being overly redundant, it says in the draft or proposed letter, we plan to contribute cash match for this grant.
Well, that's what Rob had just brought up, and
And
we're not doing that.
That's not a positive, and I'm only bringing that up again as an example, but I don't like form letters. It's really, it just says, well, you guys took the easy way out, you didn't think your way through it, and you didn't give us direct feedback. Though the project, I support the project. And lastly, and so I guess I'm asking, should we just adjust a little bit, and hit it to the point we support the grant for the purposes of? And secondly, would we get any Ely feedback?
Yeah.
Because he's so involved in, or just for the support here. Obviously, I think we do this ourselves, but he's run this by John, this is what we're doing.
And Rachel did run it by John again. I think Rachel got it late and we got it late, and so we haven't had a chance as staff to come back and, I'm actually sending John an email now.
Yeah, I ended up seeing John yesterday evening, and I didn't talk to him about it either. He was somewhere event I was at.
Yeah, this has to evolve, but I think this is an important step. Data is critical in any number of things. For example, the pill example you just used.
Yeah. Well, let's, if it's okay with the board, leave it that we will write a support letter and get it in by the Friday deadline of this week, and have John Ely and John Peacock together write a much simpler letter that is just expressing our support for this type of project, and kind of go from there. Okay. Thank you. Other open discussion items,
Yeah,
John?
I've got one more, and George, I believe this is one you asked me to bring up. We had a complaint about the shooting range, Michael referenced it earlier, that's located on the landfill property and used by law enforcement agencies for training. And the range is governed by an ordinance that was passed by the board back in 2004. And it allows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday use of the range from 8 to 12. I'm assuming that's 8 in the morning to noon, not the other way around. And occasional night shoots in the summer and fall. And there wasn't really a lot more definition put around that. We've informally had, I think, an agreement with the law enforcement agencies that would those night shoots would end by 10 o'clock. The the range isn't really managed, and we didn't really have a chance to get into it when Michael was raising the issue, but it's not really managed necessarily by the landfill nor the Sheriff's Department. It's actually managed by the Roaring Fork Firearms Program, which is made up of the law enforcement agencies, including Aspen Police Department, Basalt, the Sheriff's Department,
Snowmass.
and Snowmass PD, thank you. And then the Law Enforcement Training Academy occasionally also uses it, but aren't involved in isn't involved in the management. And so we did have a complaint. I think maybe you got a phone call too, George, and Jack, you got a phone call also. Both of you got phone calls.
At 9:15, it was mine.
Yeah, and what I understand of the complaint is that it was a complaint about the shooting that was going on. It did end apparently at 10 o'clock. I don't know if you guys heard differently, but it did wake up this individual, I think, and their children. And I think this has been the subject of some past complaints.
There were
I guess
3 complaints.
There were 3 complaints.
I just talked to Carrington outside before the...
Oh, you, okay.
Yes, in the meeting.
I have the one in front of me, so. That's kind of the background on it. I don't know if George or Jack.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is it that we want to bring the ordinance before us to refine it and narrow the use opportunities and our relationship with the individuals and clarify who to contact or when manages it?
Yeah, I think going back to Michael's comments and concerns, which I didn't realize, but to this point, I think it is unreasonable to allow shooting up to 10 o'clock at night. And I understand that they want to do this for low visibility, for safety purposes, but if they do this in the fall, when the days are shorter, it could be done by 8 o'clock in the evening versus in the summertime where you've got longer days. And I definitely empathize with people who live near a shooting range and have kids and families. And after 9 o'clock at night, I think that's really unreasonable.
But what I would suggest is maybe we bring back, because I don't have a lot of background right now to give you on how the shooting range has been managed, how often these night shoots are occurring. George, I think what you're saying is perfectly reasonable. I don't know if there's other reasons out there that law enforcement has chosen different times, and maybe there are good ones, and but maybe there aren't. So what I'd encourage us to do is to bring some of the affected parties back into a workshop to review the ordinance and review our practice in managing it, and then we can make some decisions about revisions or such that'd be necessary.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we need more information. I can imagine where there might be circumstances where there's been a lot of turnover on the force, and you have a number of people who might not have been, reviewed for their nighttime shooting safety, and yet they're going to be patrolling the streets until October. And so I can see individual unique circumstances that we might want to deal with. But I think all of us to take a new look and review this makes a lot of sense. And, I'd be interested to find out what were the noise suppression items that they were able to put in at Lake Christine as well, so that we might want to look at, are there ways to, help with that?
Yeah, I don't think Basalt will be very happy to hear people will be shooting there at 10 o'clock.
No, I wasn't saying that we move there, but that we find out no, that was not what I was saying. What I was saying is that some of the booths, the way the physical improvements were supposed to help with some noise suppression, which might be beneficial even for daytime shoots. So I'd love to see how that's playing out, I guess is all I was saying. Jack?
I believe that hasn't been implemented yet, the actual physical construction. I would absolutely agree about taking another look at this, but, and I think I'm free to share this, Carrington's opinion is one of the biggest problems is this has just been a laissez-faire thing of how we've managed it. And so we need to get our hands around it all. I think before we get anyone together, we also, as I just heard about a half a minute of what Michael was saying, we want to get feedback from that caucus, as well as, I think we know what the feedback's going to be from Aspen Village. But, Michael has brought to us throughout the planning, the landfill master planning process, about problems with that and how it has occurred. And I'm not remembering, we didn't move the location of that. So, maybe what you're suggesting, we also understand if there's anything that could be done, just generally speaking, much less night, that's a whole other thing. But we need to really relook at all of this for both ends. And I mentioned when Ned talked to me on the phone, I said, well, I understand about public safety and maybe the need for this, but no notice, except, so we just need to delve into this and get it tweaked up.
Yeah, I can see that. I think we've seen a slow growth over time in the number of officers on all the forces of those people, and each one might have only added incrementally 1 or 2 people, but it becomes a magnitude of more practice that,
Well, and this was a specific training group, so it was a fixed group, but still, it was just that it happened and no one knew not to expect.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll leave that with you to
We'll
prepare
follow
that
up.
and bring it back to us. Other items at all, John?
That's all I've got for you.
Okay, well, you're on the bike team, you know that tomorrow.
Yes, apparently I'm on the bike team.
Okay. Other open discussion items from board members?
The only thing I would suggest is we meet actually a couple minutes earlier than just 15. So
Okay.
Take a look at the
Okay,
bike.
let's make it 1:40.
1:30.
Yeah.
40?
1:40. In here.
Right, you don't know.
Okay.
I think you guys should meet this afternoon, go for a bike ride,
There we go.
do some training.
Individually.
I gotta get some Aleve in my neck before I even start to do that. But, okay, other,
And clarification, Rachel, you said, is this just a celebrity bike race between the city and us? And
Yes.
No one
else.
Just the
It's
2
just-
teams?
they only got 2 4-person bikes, so
Okay.
It sounds like a warm up the crowd type of thing,
that's right. Give people
Have something to do while they're watching the race on the big screen.
Yeah.
See us on the ground.
Fun. I mean, that's why I'm
I want to be off
participating.
that course.
Do we have
before they're
team
coming down.
uniforms?
We should think about that. That's a good idea.
Well,
I
You
don't know
don't
if
wear
we have
tie-dye t-shirts or
safety
something?
vests or
or-
There was a part cycling T-shirts, and we can see if we get some road and bridge hats or something.
You work on that, Teresa. You can come up with anything goofy for us, that'll be good. Maybe give us little
Yeah,
kitty
that's
sheriff
what mine-
badges. you know.
Whatever those tights are, you'd be embarrassed.
Okay.
Uh,
Rob has some open discussion.
Yeah, I have one thing. I went to the East of Aspen caucus meeting last week, and there were a couple very happy group up there, I'll say, just in general. There were a couple things that they brought up that I kind of stepped in on and talked about a few things. One was internet, which seems to be a concern for a lot of our rural areas. They're actually trying to fund among them getting the pipeline up if Comcast would agree to do the wiring type thing. So potentially down the road, as we deal with Comcast and their agreements with us, maybe it's something that we can help them out with in terms of facilitating the communication between those two things. I also mentioned the upcoming ballot question on the translator thing, and that would potentially help wireless services throughout our county. Whether it was specifically help them or not, I wasn't sure, but they seemed interested in knowing that that's coming up. So the other thing that they talked about, which they put in their budget item in terms of their limited budget that they have, is similar to what's happening in Redstone, having a phone at the bottom of the pass. Apparently they've had situations where there have been accidents and people have walked down the pass or something, and there's no phone down there, so they go and they start knocking on these empty houses, and it's a safety issue for the houses, it's a safety issue for the person. So I don't know exactly what what we finally came to with the Redstone thing, but I said, well, the county is potentially doing something for the Redstone area because there's limited cell service up there, and well, there's limited cell service. I don't know if we need to get CDOT involved, but it might be something that we can coordinate, maybe helping them with their annual expense of that phone line and that sort of thing. So that was,
Yeah.
I told them I would
Interesting to find out
told them I would bring it up.
How far up actual landlines go up the
Yeah.
pass, which I don't know. Where is the last,
Where can they
phone-
get a landline, and where can they get
Yeah, where-
cell service?
Yeah,
Where the
and-
two
and-
Well, it might be
change.
difficult or something.
Yeah. But,
So it's certainly a safety issue for the pass, whether it be bikers, hikers, or drivers, to have quick access to a working phone. And it seemed to me that they were ready to kind of move forward with what they wanted to do, but it also seems like it's a safety issue that the county should take some sort of, the county should partake in some
Yeah.
respect. So.
Yeah. So, John, I don't know if that's the best one to be kind of between Dan and the sheriff's department, or have maybe the sheriff's department look at it first and kind of scope it out. Because it was the sheriff's department that brought us the Redstone one, and they're the ones who deal with emergency situations. So,
Yeah, I think we probably want to talk to the sheriff about it. Now, there's not an existing line. We're looking at bringing one up there.
They were looking at bringing one into, I think it was somewhere just near the difficult campground, is I think what they said.
yeah. I don't know enough about it, but to see where or how we could get a call box, I guess. George, do you have your hand up?
Well, I was assuming there must be phone service up by Difficult with all those houses, and actually even a little beyond with, what's his name's house up there?
Costner.
Yeah, what's his name?
Yeah, what's his name? I guess my only concern is, every drainage in this county has the same problem. You go to Frying Pan, you go up Snowmass Creek, go Capitol Creek, go Maroon Creek, go Council Creek, they all have the same problem. And so are we going to start instituting, we're paying for phone lines, emergency phones? Maybe we should, but I'm just saying, every drainage has the same issue.
Yeah. Well, that one may have the potential of some connection with CDOT and safety there as a state highway, and so it's a little bit of a unique characteristic compared to the others. But you're right, George, and that's why we're putting that ballot question forward, to see, what type of improvements we can make for safety and commercial, business. Very good. Thank you for attending that and for bringing us back those concerns. They're very well suited to this board's look. Anybody else have any open discussion items? I don't, other than to wish everyone a great Labor Day weekend, since we won't be seeing each other, meeting again before then.
Well, we have our community volunteer picnic at 5 o'clock.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
That's right. We'll all be back here at 5. Anything else for anyone? Well, I guess I will say a brief word for Grassroots TV that we are having a volunteer appreciation party this evening for all the citizen board volunteers of Pickens County, and just to briefly thank them publicly for that service. We couldn't operate without it. They are our eyes and ears on the street, and certainly help us with decision-making on any number of areas. So whether it's a conflict resolution pool, or translator advisory board, or planning and zoning, or healthy rivers and stream, when you see, or if you see a neighbor or a friend or a coworker who is giving their time to the community in this way, thank them for us as well. We really greatly appreciate that, and appreciate the overall structure of community involvement. So thank you very much, Grassroots TV. I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Okay, thank you.
Just quick for you guys, myself.